What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Backup Fantasy Sports. It is Tuesday, August 2nd. My name is Ewan, and today we will be talking about some F1 fantasy with a Hungarian Grand Prix winners and losers episode. It was a crazy weekend outside of Budapest with some weather coming into play. We had some Nicholas Latifi leading the third practice, and everyone was wondering what is going on, but it dried up a little bit. And when qualifying started, the normal favorites returned to the top of the standings. Well, mostly. So let's get into it. In Q1, we had Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon, Sebastian Vettel, Pierre Gasly, and Nicholas Latifi go out as per usual. It was actually the first time since 2008 that Sebastian Vettel failed to reach Q3 in Hungary, which was a sad fact considering it will be his last time there after he announced his retirement on Instagram on Thursday afternoon. In Q2, we saw Sergio Perez, Zhou Guanyu, Kevin Magnussen with the newly updated Haas, Lance Stroll, and Mick Schumacher go out. It was the second time this year that Perez went out in Q2, but he has not had success in Hungary, as he hasn't made Q3 in 7 of his last 9 visits. But then we moved on to the Q3 shootout with Sainz, Leclerc, all looking very strong, trying to make good on the prediction that Matteo Binotto made about Ferrari going for the 1-2 win. They were looking really good for a front row lockout, but then on the first flying lap, George Russell for Mercedes actually split them and went into second. So it was Sainz, Russell, Leclerc. After the first flying lap, Verstappen came in 7th there. And then on the final lap, Max Verstappen was complaining about some car issues. I believe it became a power unit. So he actually was going to start 10th. He did not improve on his time. Charles Leclerc couldn't get past Carlos Sainz, so he was second. Carlos Sainz improved on his time. And then right at the death, George Russell came out of nowhere and grabbed Mercedes' first pole of 2022. So the lineup for Sunday's race was George Russell, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris coming in 4th, Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso going 5 and 6 for Alpine, Hamilton with a DRS issue, Valtteri Bottas finally gets back into Q3, Daniel Ricciardo made it into Q3, and Max Verstappen was 10th. So 10th and 11th for Red Bull was not a good start to their hopes for a productive Sunday. It was the first time Max qualified outside the top 4 all season, his lowest ever start at the Hungaroring. Both Alpines qualified in the top 6 for the first time this season. Norris in 4th was his highest start of the season and the best start for McLaren in Hungary since 2012, when a couple of world champions, Lewis Hamilton on pole and Jenson Button in 4th. And then it was still with Ricciardo coming in 9th, it was McLaren's first time getting both cars in Q3 since Imola. And Bottas, like I said, finally made Q3 for the first time since the Spanish Grand Prix. So that was some wild and wacky weather. Sunday it was going to calm down a little bit more. There was eventually some rain, but right off the bat, Russell had some good reaction time. He was able to defend going into the first corner well. Ferrari looked super speedy. They were kind of weaving on the track to warm up their tires and still keeping pace. Max and Sergio did their Red Bull thing, and they pretty quickly scooted into the top 8. They both passed Ocon on lap 7, and then it was kind of focusing on the pit stops. So on lap 22, Charles Leclerc went in for his first pit stop, but he wasn't able to undercut George Russell. He eventually passed him, but then Red Bull and Verstappen kind of threw a spanner in the works as they pitted for a second time on lap 39, and that sent the Ferrari pit wall into a little bit of chaos because Leclerc came in, pitted, and put him onto hards, and that did not go well, as one lap later, Charles was passed by Max. Even after a 360 spin after hitting some water, Max was able to pass Charles again, and then Russell passed Charles. Eventually, Ferrari flew up the white flag, and on lap 55 of 70, they pitted Charles onto some soft tires, but it was too late, and he couldn't make up the time. And it did seem to be a theme of the day for Ferrari, as Hamilton eventually passed Sainz for third. He was on softs. He was looking mega fast as he passed George Russell for second as well. He was creeping up on Max Verstappen there. We could have had a pretty epic battle at the end of this race because there was rain incoming, but I think the race was maybe 5 laps too short for that to happen. Valtteri Bottas retired. Virtual safety car kind of put this race to bed, but it was a lot more exciting than usual at the Hungaroring. These new regulations are definitely working. Most of the overtaking was still done on the straight past the grandstand and the pits and into turn 1, but still a lot closer racing, and it made for quite a fun watch on Sunday afternoon. So it was Max, Lewis, and George on the podium, just like the circuit Paul Ricard the week before, with Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, Leclerc, Norris, Alonso, Ocon, and Vettel rounding out the top 10. So little F1 recap there, just of the weekend in case you missed it. And on to the winners and losers. And although Max Verstappen is a winner, I'm not going to start with him. He's in the winners category, but winner number 1 is George Russell, grabbing first pole of his career for the young British driver. It was the first pole for Mercedes in 2022, like I mentioned. It was their 8th pole in Hungary all time, so they've now tied McLaren and Ferrari for the most at the Hungaroring. He is the 105th different driver to sit on pole in F1 history. So not a totally nice number, round number, but still been a great achievement for him. He finished third on Sunday, and he can claim to be the only driver with this stat. He has at least 24 fantasy points in the F1 game in 12 of 13 races this season. The only one being that Silverstone DNF after the Zhou Guanyu crash on turn 1. So he's been the model of consistency this year, and it shows up in the stats. I mean, he's right now in the game, he's got the 3rd most points at 369. And he's been going strong even in the last 5 with 120 over the last 5. And I don't think a lot of people expected him to challenge Lewis as much as he has in the first half of the year. He's been a lot more consistent. Lewis has been very, very strong to finish this first half of the year before the summer break. But George is definitely showing that he has the capabilities to handle being in a top team, and I would not be scared off him in the second half from a fantasy perspective. And it feels like if this car can keep going strength to strength in the second half of the year, that a Mercedes win is inevitable in 2022. Next up in the winners, I already mentioned him, Max Verstappen. Getting a bit boring having him in the winner section, but man, does he deserve it. Started 10th on Sunday after that power unit issue in qualifying. It was the first win of his career when starting outside the top 4, so unfamiliar territory for the Red Bull driver here. He's got an 80-point lead in the Drivers' Championship standings, so he could sit out 3 straight races and he would still be in the lead. It'd probably be 4 or 5 with how Ferrari is acting right now, but he's been so consistent. He's the top point scorer in the game. He had another 50-point weekend despite qualifying in 10th. So it was his 5th 50-point fantasy weekend of the season, thanks to a race streak being enabled as well. So he has 5. The rest of the field has 2 combined, and those 2 belong to Charles Leclerc. what else is there to say? He's about to go back to back in the Drivers' Championship. He's got 512 points in the first half. Starting to feel pretty essential if you want to make a run. I know he costs a lot of money. He's 30 million. $30.4 million in the game. But at this point, it seems like the men are starting to separate from the boys as the season moves along. And I'm perfectly fine dedicating 30% of my overall budget to Max, especially when he is scoring as consistently as he is. Right out of the summer break, we've got Belgium and the Netherlands. So those should be strong tracks for Max to continue what is turning out to be quite a dominant season. He's now got 8 race wins. Double-digit wins seem inevitable. He can probably coast to the finish line at this point. And then the final winner is going to be Fernando Alonso, not really for his on-track exploits, but big news. He is moving to Aston Martin on a multi-year contract. It was announced on Monday morning, 4-5 days after Sebastian Vettel announced his retirement from the sport. Sounds like Aston Martin wasted no time in bringing another storied legend into their paddock as they continue to develop and grow in the F1 sport. They still need a face of the franchise, if you will. With Lance Stroll, not exactly... he has a face that not a lot of people like looking at. He's just, unfortunately, I'm sure he's a talented driver, but you'll just never get away from being the son of the owner. It's always going to be tough. So Alonso's going to come in and head up that program for, you would think, the remainder of his career, but apparently it's a 2-year deal with an option at the end. Could he still race after that? I don't know. But it will be interesting as he is going from an Alpine car that is genuinely competing for 4th in the Constructors' Championship with McLaren to this Aston Martin car that is currently battling to not be 9th. They are not close to Alfa Romeo. They're looking a little bit stronger as the first half ended, but it really is going to be... interesting to see how Alonso can look at this long term. He's at the twilight of his career. I mean, the twilight portion of the twilight of his career. I mean, we keep thinking, how can he keep racing? But he's still here. He's still putting results up. It's great for a legend to stay in the sport. Really interested to see how that goes. I know Aston Martin's making big developments in their program, getting a wind tunnel and a factory online next year. So they're definitely showing some seriousness about building up their reputation in the sport. But F1 is down to money, so you can't really get sponsorships if your drivers are Lance Stroll and like Pierre Gasly, for example. So Alonso, 2-time world champ, being face of that franchise is going to be great. As for what actually happened in Hungary, he qualified 6th, but finished 8th. That was his 8th straight points finish. So he's been going steady as the season moves along here. Ends the first half of the season with the 3rd most points per dollar over the last 5 races. So that's showing him as a budget option. He's getting 1.53 points per $1 million. So not a lot you can do. I mean, there's a lot you can do with his price point, because 12 million, where he's currently at 12.6 million, is very manageable. Kind of a nice price point considering it's only 0.3 more than Ocon. It's less than Ricardo. You can fit in Alonso if you maybe wanted to go like Verstappen, Russell, and Alonso. I haven't looked at everything yet, but we can do that a little bit more over the summer break. And then on to the sad part of the episode, which is the losers. And once again, like Max being in the winners, there is nowhere else to start with the losers other than Ferrari. I mean, how many more times do they have to be in this category for the rest of the season? I want a title race. F1 fans want a title race, but it seems like Ferrari cannot stop driving over their own feet. They've ruined Charles's day, put him on the hard tires. They started 2-3 on the grid, finished 4th and 6th, like just not going to get it done if you're trying to compete for world championships, especially in a race where their main title rivals started 10th and 11th. After the race, scrolling on social media and you see all the memes about the race and stuff like that. And usually it's like varied, like, oh, that happened in the race. This was funny. That was funny. No, 95% of this was directed at how big of a clown show Ferrari is turning into. It's like I said last week, it's like Charles Leclerc in the lead is like a bad bullpen, and you just wait for it to implode. You just know bad things are going to happen, and you're just wondering what can happen next. How are they going to screw it up this time? Well, this time they did it again by putting them onto the hard tires when every other team was putting their top drivers onto mediums towards the end of the race. Matteo Binotto said before the weekend that Ferrari needed a 1-2 finish, and then after the race he oddly was saying that a win wasn't achievable for Ferrari. He wasn't blaming these. He was saying that the going on the hard tires was wrong, but he seemed to blame the pace more than the strategy, which is just very awkward considering Charles was like, yeah, I definitely could have won today. So it's awkward spot for Charles Leclerc because obviously he's a talented driver. He's got all the talent in the world. He's made a couple of crucial mistakes this year, obviously, but where would he go from Ferrari? Like, if we're just throwing that out there, like he's not gonna, like, they have the car. It seems like they don't have the paddock. But I don't know. I can't see the Italian boys in red making a drastic move to get rid of Binotto or anyone else up at the top there, just for consistency purposes, and it's just a strange situation because they are now 97 points away from Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, and they're only 30 points ahead of Mercedes. And I know I said it last time on the French Grand Prix review show, but if a Ferrari fan woke up from a coma and was like, oh my goodness, we're in second, they would be elated. They'd be happy that Charles is in second, happy that Carlos got his first win. But when you watch each race and you just see the potential that they had for this season to really take it to Red Bull and how they keep messing it up each week, it's very frustrating as just a neutral observer. I don't really have a dog in the fight in terms of who I support, but if you were a Ferrari fan, I would feel like a bus hit you every Monday morning or Sunday night after watching this team throw away chance after chance to keep bringing the fight to Red Bull, who look inevitable now to pull off the double after getting the Drivers' Championship last year. Next loser, kind of off the track like with Fernando Alonso in the winners, but Pierre Gasly. Signed with AlphaTauri way too early. Kind of panicked about not having a seat for 2023. But now as we enter the summer breaks, a seat opened up at Aston Martin. That's been gobbled up. But now there's an opening at Alpine. There's rumors that Nicholas Latifi will no longer be in a Williams next season. There's all these, it's silly season is starting to open up. The Ricardo rumors at McLaren. He's only scored points in 3 of the 13 races this season. He's scored once in the last 10. And yeah, just tough look for Gasly. It also sounds like Oscar Piastri is going to get that anti-Alpine seat if the French team want to hold on to their very talented driver there. But Gasly could have had his name in the mix here. He could have gotten out of that Red Bull program. He was once in the number 2 seat there. Didn't handle it all that well, had some tough luck. But I think at this point in his career, if he wants to progress, he needs to get out of the Red Bull Academy. But his early signing looks like it's cost him a chance of doing that until 2024 at this point. And AlphaTauri just are tough look for those guys. Yuki Tsunoda is just floundering. He's got 5 negative fantasy point races in his last 7, to be the lowest scorer of the season with 43 points through 13 races. So not good at all. AlphaTauri seem to be going in reverse after some early season hype that they would be battling with Alfa Romeo and Alpine for at least 5th, but they are down at the bottom of the standings for sure. And the final loser this weekend hurts my heart a tiny bit, is Haas. They brought upgrades for the first time in 2022 to their car. They gave it to Kevin Magnussen. I think I saw that they couldn't get both cars upgraded because of production issues, but Magnussen said the upgrades were promising, but the results did not play out that way, as they didn't really look competitive at all this weekend. They both went out in Q2, didn't get any points all weekend, so that's now back-to-back races without points after some fantastic weekends in Silverstone and Austria. They're 17 points back of Alfa Romeo for 6th, so we'll see how the upgrades can go. Maybe they can get stronger, but obviously Alfa Romeo can get more upgrades on their car as they move along throughout the season, and Haas will need to get some serious giddy up in their factory if they want to keep improving their car throughout the year. Aston Martin's starting to look stronger as well down the first half here, with Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll consistently scoring points now. Although AlphaTauri are looking very bad this year, you can't expect them to keep flailing around like this either, especially part of like the Red Bull program. They need to right the ship real quick, or otherwise they're going to find themselves in 9th place at the end of the year. And after what was such a promising start to the season with Magnussen and then the rise of Mick Schumacher in early July, it would be a shame to see them finish so far down the standings for the 2022 season. So we are now 13 races in through the 2022 calendar. So let's just have a little fantasy recap here. Most points, no shock here. Max Verstappen, 512. Charles Leclerc, 375. George Russell, 369. Lewis Hamilton, 363. So he is catching those other two ahead of him. Sergio Perez at 343. Carlos Sainz at 310. You'd have to be encouraged for Mercedes there. Without a win, they still have the 3rd and 4th most fantasy points. Very interesting. And they seem destined to get a win this year. I'm not sure which track it will be at, as we've got some street circuits coming up towards the end of the season here. So they will need to get another win at a traditional track and avoid those street circuits. Most points per dollar, Charles Leclerc comes in. I guess you could call him the value fantasy MVP of the first half with 1.53 points per million. Bottas 1.47, Checo 1.45, Carlos 1.39, Lance Stroll at 1.34, and Max is up at 1.3, which is fantastic considering he costs $30 million and he went DNF, win DNF to start the season, and he's just been a shining example of consistency since that last problem in Australia in the 3rd race of the season. But then also let's look at who is ending the first half on a strong note. Like I said, Lewis has been super impressive, 5 straight podiums. He now has more podiums than Charles Leclerc in the 2022 season. He's got 6. Charles has 5, which just shows you what a disaster it's been for Ferrari in like the back half of this first half of the season. But yeah, over the last 5 races, Max 213, Lewis 208, Carlos 159, Charles 124, and Russell 120. Everyone else is sitting at 100 points or under over the last 5. And then here we go with who has been giving you the bang for your buck over the last 5. We've got Mick Schumacher at 2.03 points per million. Carlos, Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll again, which is making me question if I need to put my bias aside of just not really liking the Strolls all that much and start to think about getting him in. And then Max and Lewis here at 1.4 and 1.38. So lots going on there. Lots to break down. I think Max Verstappen is essential at this point. I think Red Bull aren't messing around. They're just going to win race after race. Even when they falter now, they seem to strategize their way through the field, and they can just wait for Ferrari to mess up. Maybe the summer break will help out the Italians, but I don't know. It's tough out there if you're a Ferrari fan. For my team, I had Verstappen with 55 points, Carlos Sainz with 26, Lando Norris with 16. After his impressive practice runs, I got Norris in. Kept K-Mag because he got the upgrades, but that came out with a beautiful -1. And then Turbo Driver Charles for 28 with Alpine as my constructor. I was trying to buy into their race streak, but they only got me 23 points. And as the summer break comes up, I am in the top 35K in the world, top 1100 in Germany. So not too shabby. I'd love to sneak up the rankings, maybe get into the top 20K in the world by the end of the season here. It's getting tougher to move up the standings as people are just figuring out the formula, and some teams that are not even active are just, they've locked in these price points and they're just keep going along. And yeah, I mean, winning my mini league, so that's all that matters really, even though there's only 5 of us. But next up is the Belgian Grand Prix, August 26th through the 28th. So we've got about a 4-week break here, 3.5 weeks until that race comes up as the summer break kicks off. Silly season rumors will be flying around. We'll see if we get anything to settle down with McLaren and Alpine, see if we get any final words on those kind of things. If anything massive happens, I will, maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll do a news recap pod for F1. But if not, my next F1 fantasy podcast will be the week before the Belgian Grand Prix, so probably about August 25th, August 26th there. So 3.5 weeks until the next F1 fantasy pod. You can follow me on Twitter at UIN or UOut. That's EUAN. You can like and subscribe the podcast to wherever you listen, on Spotify, Google, Apple. It's on Overcast now. I double checked that. Enjoy the summer break. Take a little bit of time off. Download the F1 2022 video game if you're just craving watching racetracks. That's what I've been doing. I'll definitely be hopping on there to check out the Belgian Grand Prix track before the preview pod. And once again, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time.